Morning, everybody. I'm Mark Limbruni, and I'm the head of news audio for Vice Media. And I'm here today to kind of tell the story of how we use Adobe and Premiere to kind of optimize and build workflows inside our shows. And we've seen some amazing gains across the board. This is going to be kind of a story of how you can take what you're currently doing, whether or not you're doing a rapid turnaround type of story, a 10-piece episodic or kind of a feature film, and build as much as you can into your process inside Premiere. But before we talk about that, a little bit about me. I've been doing audio and working with teams for about 10 years. I've worked with NPR, ESPN, EA Games, and I've been at Vice for 4 years where I helped launch the news that just started, which I'm going to talk about today. But let's talk a little bit more about Vice, if you don't know about him. Vice is definitely a global media company. We have offices kind of all over the world, and we're operating in 30 territories with plans to keep on expanding. Vice has a pretty long history of working with Adobe products. Today I'm going to be talking about Vice News and a new show that we just launched this past month, which is airing on Viceland. The show's called Vice Live. But outside of that, we have a lot of other properties that use Adobe products in this workflow that I'm going to be describing today. We have Broadly, Motherboard, the Creators Project, which are a bunch of online presences that have a lot of great content on technology, art, and culture. Beyond that, we have Virtue, which is a creative services program. And we also have Waypoint. So if you like gaming, podcasts, live streaming, you definitely have to check them out. For our editorial, we use Premiere for pretty much everything. On top of that, for art direction, graphics, MilgArts, we use kind of the whole creative suite: InDesign, Stock, Photoshop, After Effects. And we also use Audition for podcasts, VO, and it's like a great kind of live engine to do our live streaming. So let's dig deeper into kind of how we use these products by focusing on the story of how we launched Vice News tonight. So here's a bit of a trailer to kind of give you a taste of what the show is.
Obviously, they're sending out a lot of airstrikes.
We didn't stop this button.
Extremely bizarre experience.
In that 1 gram, that's actually 50,000 fatal overdoses.
That's a city.
It was scary. Honestly, I didn't expect our house to be standing.
This was my son's room. 4 people died within a quarter of a mile of here.
Where are their snipers?
We're taking fire.
The alt-right is very organized. They have a lot of numbers. They have shields.
We're not non-violent. We'll fucking kill these people if we have to. Mike's jumped in the fucking van.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
There are bodies laying on the ground right now.
I think that a lot more people are going to die before we're done here, frankly.
Let's go. Okay, so these guys are going into the tunnel now. They haven't actually cleared this area yet. Haiti.
As far as we're aware, we're the first foreign journalists that have been taken here.
Yeah, there are footprints everywhere. There are people that have been walking around here.
Yung boss po namin, pulis po siya.
Down on the mall, things were quiet, they were orderly, they were peaceful. If you were down on the mall for Donald Trump's inaugural, you had no idea this scene was happening just a handful of blocks away.
All right, thanks. So a little bit more about the show. Since being on air in the end of 2016, we've had 515 nightly half-hour episodes. We've had over 10 specials. We've won 5 News and Doc Emmys, a bunch of nominations, and as you can see, we've had a lot of different accolades. We're the largest single content provider for HBO, longest-running live broadcast, and first one that they've done as a daily series, and the youngest demographic for news kind of across the industry. So a lot of firsts there. Digging into kind of the post format of the show so we can understand kind of the needs and the requirements of what sort of workflow we needed to build. The show airs every night, 4 nights a week at 7:30. It's about 20 to 28 minutes. We build the show in like different stories and packages, which is kind of, you saw little bits of that in that trailer back there. They're built all in export and Premiere, and they're played out live on VizRT. So for like a day of package that's telling the story of what's happening today, it will shoot it, edit it, and it will go to air as little as 60 minutes. We have long form packages, which might be a longer edit. Let's say it's a story about a water crisis or a conflict that's going on in an area of the world. A long edit for us might be 2 to 3 days. That's when you're really taking your time to work on it. Again, our goal is to kind of be as current as possible throughout the whole process. So let's talk about turnaround times for post-production. For a sample story like a desk report, it's a correspondent talking to camera, interviewing someone, kind of giving you a story from an area. It might be a 2 to 5 minute piece, and we need to turn it around and mix in color for 10 to 15 minutes. Again, the show goes live at 7:30, so it needs to be pretty much done by 7. For something that's a bit longer, again, like maybe those conflict pieces, a 5 to 10 minute piece will need to be turned around in 30 to 45 minutes. So the goal here is to really prioritize as much time in editorial and writing to keep the story as current as possible. And kind of the idea of this workflow is to optimize what you're doing to prioritize the writing. So when I came in and when I talked with our EPs and our producers as to what we needed a system that was extremely fast for time. We need to be able to make changes pretty much up to air. I mean, there's plenty of times when we'll be covering something that happens in Washington, like a few weeks ago when the Mueller report came out, and it's, 5 of 7, and we need to completely change a package in a story because the news has changed. A tweet can really change what's happening. So we need something that we can make changes up to that. The quality has to be good. I mean, we're airing on HBO. We're going to be alongside, John Oliver, Game of Thrones. This has to be a quality production. We can't just rush through it. We're not going to skimp time on quality. And on top of that, because we have such a large team, it has to have full compatibility. We have to be able to open a project, work, and export it pretty much from every single machine at Vice. With the fact that we're going right up to air, we need to tweak during final review, because that's really the only time we have to do it to maintain quality. Because so many machines are using it, we have to use stock plugins. We can't use third-party affiliates for it. And we have to kind of get ahead of the process. So as we're working on a story throughout the day, we have to pre-mix, do color and review, and the edit. And the only product that could really offer that for us is working pretty much entirely in Creative Cloud with Premiere Pro. So what have we gained from it? It's been pretty amazing. To be honest, like our typical other workflows would be going to different DAWs and other programs, but to be able to be doing our color and mix post-finishing entirely in Premiere has cut our production time by 80%, which has had an enormous effect on the company. And again, we're not just doing this for news. We've brought this to other programs, long forms, stories, feature films. Typically a normal half-hour TV episodic piece would take about 30 hours, 3 or 4 days of mix time, working back and forth. We've reduced that to about 2 hours, and sometimes even quicker. It's great. We don't have to move it to another program. There's no AAFs, there's no OMFs, there's no transfling, there's no EDLs, there's no prep time. If you want to make a change at any point, your finished product is the current edit. And because of that, we can have a single project that we can do all our exports, which have saved us a crazy amount of time. So let's talk a little bit more about that exporting. Now, we have this one project, and we have over 20 deliverable formats. We don't just deliver to HBO every night going live to air. We also take the content and repackage it nightly to different markets internationally, which all have different requirements in terms of post needs, specs, conform. Maybe we'll have to cut out certain words in different markets. So again, working from a singular project saves that time incredibly. We also have to repackage everything for all our social media markets, which has different requirements. And then on top of that, we have to have a kind of elegant way to archive all of this. It's news. We're going to come back and tell the story again. We're going to repeat what we were talking about. And so it needs to be archived in a really intelligent way. So again, working with a single project, we can export to all these formats. So the best way to understand this is it's not simply just how we engineer a project or the single tools. It's about organizing your team to work in kind of an assembly line in an efficient way. It's about creating ownership of the process, especially audio, which we found takes the most amount of time in post-production. So we can have an efficient workflow in it, and as well using the tools. So let's dig into how like a package with the show works. Typically, we shoot it on cameras, and it comes in either card, live view from the field, satellite, fiber streams, and it's brought into Ingest. We have our QC team look over it and bring it into a project. From there, our AEs sync the media and string it out, break it into scenes. Here's an interview here. This is approaching the courthouse, et cetera, et cetera. After it's all synced, it's sent to edit. Edit will get VO. They'll work with After Effects and MoGarts, Photoshop, giving all the content they need for our graphics-heavy packages. And once the story's kind of assembled, then we use an approach which I like to call the stoplight. So the edit holds off for a moment, either the whole project or maybe just an act of it, and then we send it over to color and mix. Color and mix kind of works kind of like an Indy 500, and we're a pit crew. We run in, we do what we can, working on color and mix, and then pass it back to edit. We do this throughout the day. We pre-mix projects throughout the edit. And that way, we're ready to go. So we duplicate the project on our server, and our team of mixers will mix it, and colorists at the same time will work on the duplicated project and color it, and then we merge the two timelines. We call it marrying, basically pasting the finished color assets on top of the audio assets in the sequence, and we send it back to edit. From there, we send it to our control room where we do kind of some final stacking, assembling it. We export it, and then it plays out live to VizRT. So diving to that process a bit more, the first thing we do for Ingest is bring all of our media in and QC it inside Premiere. I mean, it makes the most sense if you're going to be using the media to edit in a certain place, use it also for QC. And that's helped so many times. Make sure the format is exactly the way we want it. From there, it goes over to our AEs. And what I really require people to do is to go through and pick the best audio channels as they string out. So this is an example which you might have seen. It's a 2-person interview, 3-camera shoot with external audio. So there's a field mixer there. You're looking at easily 13 channels of audio. And I can't tell you how many times as a mixer that I've gotten from an editor a big block of all these audio channels. And it's always like, I don't know what they are. Just kind of leave them all active, whatever. Basically, with Essential Sound and training our teams, I ask the AEs to go through and pick the most essential sources. In this scenario, 2 people talking, 2 lavs, and those are the only 2 that are active. This kind of streamlines the process, because if you don't make this decision now, you're pushing it off for the mixer to do. You're pushing it off to the end of the process. If someone's going to make decisions as they're ingesting stuff, it might as well happen now. Now, this is a common thing I hear when working with teams. I can't tell what's the best track. I thought you need everything. Well, thankfully, one of the greatest things about finishing inside the same program that you actually edit is the fact that you can dynamically switch the media. I mean, all of our audio is pretty much recorded to camera or to multi-channel wave, and you can just kind of right-click and change the channel source. If you were working in a program that required an OMF or an AAF, you wouldn't have the ability to do this. You'd have to re-export it. Oh, I didn't have the mic for that scene. This way, even though the AEs might be making decisions, you might want to change it later, nothing is lost. You can go back and change it. And one of the reasons why I love working in Premiere. So let's talk more about the edit process. And this is kind of where the engineering and the real benefits of finishing in Premiere come out. So at this point, we know we've ingested the media. The AE's chosen the best sources. It's pretty simply. So as our editors edit, I ask them to only cut in those great sources. So just the lav in each scene. So you're not seeing big bricks of audio. You're seeing a very nice, neat timeline. On top of that, I make templates, which is a project and a sequence, which is the same for each type of show. You'll notice over here it says VO, dialogue, nats, music. It's a set amount. So if we're working on a story and we're breaking it into segments, one editor might organize the beginning, Act 1, another editor will do Act 2. It's all organized in the same way, which saves us a ton of time. You don't have to sort through where clips are. On top of that, I'm actually baking in audio processing to each of the tracks. And again, I'm just using stock processing. I'm going to get into how that works in a moment. But the idea of it is basically a LUT on each track, trying to give it like a pre-grade processing for something that's VO or for dialogue or for music. And on top of that, I'm putting in audio processing that makes sure that the audio is legal for broadcast standards. It's a simple way, just like you would use in any other DAW, to hit, conform for all your broadcast. On top of that, we use Essential Sound, which will come through, and it will automatically gain each of the clips. And I'll show you how that works in a moment. But let's take a look under the hood of this idea of the processing on each of the tracks. So over here, you'll notice that there's VO on track 1, and this is the audio track mixer, and it also has the same name as VO. This is kind of like your sequence settings for audio tracks, where you can control routing and processing. So over here, if you click this little arrow, it shows all the processing that you have on each of the tracks, and you'll see that I'm assigning them by groups. Premiere has this idea of subgroups, right? So if you group 2 tracks together to be VO, they'll process together, and they'll get the same processing. So we have VO, dialogue, nats, music, and that also creates our stems as well. So as I slide over here, you can see at the end of these audio tracks, here are my subgroup tracks, right? And there's output assignments, and there's the processing. Let's take a closer look at that. So this is kind of like the top view of those subgroup tracks. I've divided them into your basic stems. This is so like if you wanted to recut the package without having to go into the edit, you can kind of assemble it together, right? So VO, dialogue, music, it all goes out 1 and 2, your stereo mix, but then you have isolated outputs as well. Now, depending what format I'm delivering to, web, if I'm delivering to a different show that goes straight digital, if I'm delivering to A&E, if I'm delivering to HBO, they all have different loudness and routing specs, and how I program this can meet those delivery needs. So I just change the template, and then I'm delivering to different formats kind of pretty much immediately. If you're interested, I'll go like a quick graze over how each of the processing works. So this is an example of like a basic LUT that would put on for our VO track. A de-esser to remove sibilance. An equalizer, which is kind of giving that kind of grade and LUT, remove the low end, give a little boost here or there. A compressor to kind of smooth out the volume. And then a limiter to make sure that we're hitting broadcast spec, that we're not over for legalization. And again, I've made all these different kind of templates and presets depending where we're delivering. So if we're going to go to HBO, if it's a piece that's an original edit, you use a certain template. If it's for web, you use a different one. And all I have to simply do is take the whole sequence, the video and the audio, copy it and paste it into another sequence template, and all of a sudden, I can deliver it to web. I can deliver it to Europe. I can deliver it to the Americas, what have you. The best part about this, which is a huge time saver, is there's literally no online process. We're not bringing back in a flat video. We're not taking back in stems and rerouting the channels. It's all happening inside the actual edit assembly sequence. So it's saving a ton of time. Now, let's take a look at how Essential Sound also kind of speeds this process up. Now, we've talked about, OK, the clips are organized on each of the tracks, right? But what is the most time-consuming thing when it comes to handling audio is making sure the sources sound balanced among them. So this is a simple type of interview. It's a 6-person round table. Everyone's wearing lavs. It was recorded a little wonky. I'm sure you've seen this before. Some clips are loud, some clips are soft. Where with Essential Sound, I've programmed it with the help of the Adobe team to come in and you can kind of click all of them, and you go over Essential Sound and say, oh, this is a dialogue track. And what it did there is it automatically matched the clip gain to every single clip to be the same volume. Now, this is a process that would probably take a half hour if I wanted to do this manually. I'd play it, listen to one clip, look at my meter, match it, look at the waveforms go up and down. That took 3 seconds. Right? So this is the type of speed that we're saving by using this process. It's kind of incredible. Now, if this seems a little esoteric, I'll dive in for just a moment. Why is this helpful? Well, now that everything is kind of set to be all the same volume, it's really easy to go through and make like a checkerboard sort of edit. Right? So I ask all of our editors before it goes to mix to go through and make sure everything is, yes, on the right tracks, but it's auto-matched to a good volume for dialogue, and that only the people who are talking that moment have an active track. So you don't have all the mics open and weird echo and phasing sounds. This is a nice, tight, clean edit. So a little more as to how Essential Sound works. Basically, I've programmed levels for each of these basic presets, right? So dialogue is anything that would be our broadcast volume, right? So for us, it's -24 LKFS. So anything that's VO, someone talking, or that just needs to be full spectrum volume, like music, for an intro. Beyond that, if there's music, like an underlying bed, it's a bit quieter, so I've set a preset level for that. Same thing with sound effects, same thing with ambience. And this way, if the editors have all their clips on the right tracks, they just kind of put essential sound presets for each of the clips. They have a really solid balance right off the bat. They know that it's going to be broadcast legal, and it's already getting a basic processing. On top of that, I do train teams to say, we can be a little more creative if you need to. You can gain clips up or down. You can still do your fades. And we can flag things for the other people in the mix team. So it's not just a one solution fits all. It gives you the option to spend more time doing kind of some fine-tuning along it. So let's just take a summary as to where we are after it comes out of edit. The audio clips are organized on their appropriate tracks. Only the best audio sources are easily chosen for each scene. And the clips are instantly gained to broadcast volume. Alone, that would take a day bringing to another DAW or program. And in this process, it happens just as fast as any editor would be working. This does take a lot of training. I mean, we've had a bunch of sessions. Probably I do it monthly with different teams, bringing them on board. But eventually, it becomes second nature. To have a really efficient team, if you're training and working with them, you kind of all coalesce to a style of working. And by defining these styles and templates and using essential sound, we've created that sort of uniform style. We communicate intensively as a team. And I really like this process because it creates ownership. It's the idea of nobody can make anything without everybody. It's not the, oh, I don't care, just pass it off to mix. You can spend more time doing creative things and editing if you have control and confidence over your audio, which this process absolutely gives you. So I'm a little tight on time today, but I'm going to graze into actually kind of the nuts and bolts of the audio. At this point, because everything's organized and leveled out, the audio mixers can focus on not the mundane, but of what really makes a difference, which is kind of EQing each clip, which is amazing, clip-based processing. And that way we can match them tonally. We can use audio restoration, noise reduction on each clip. We can do little fades and gains and keyframe automation. And in my mind, that's the time that your mix team should be spending. It shouldn't be organizing clips, importing them to other programs. This is the value of those mix artists right there. So that's a little bit hard to hear in this environment, but I did prep a kind of quick clip as to how it works. This is an example of a piece that came in, and I want to say it's around like 650. It's a 3-4 minute piece, and I had less than 10 minutes to mix it. It was kind of a story of, new rules for the border crossing and all that. And I'll just kind of show you how quick it is to organize the clips. So the first thing I'm going to do here is, just kind of look at it. This is clearly all dialogue. So I'm going to slide it down to our dialogue tracks. And then I'm going to bring this down as well. See, our editor only brought in the two sources that matter, probably the two people's labs. I'm going to say dialogue on them, so it's automatically going to gain them to the right level. This, I'm going to say ambience. And you can kind of see the waveform updating as I do it. It's automatically adjusting the gain to match to everything else. Here's our music tracks. I'm going to kind of wipe whatever volume automation they had on it and just kind of set it to our music preset. Take a look at the waveform here. See, it's going to snap, just a moment, to a set level. So this isn't an effects preset. It's just scaling the clip gain. From here, it's pretty easy to kind of go through and easily pick which is the best clip. So we're just going to listen here to a little bit of ambience for the opening scene. And over here, two people are going to be talking.
Have you all heard here about President Trump's executive order that promises not to separate families?
So I'm going to kind of fine-tune that little ambience for the intro, make it louder.
Have you all heard here about President Trump's executive order that promises
Obviously, the
not
top
to
one
separate
sounds better,
families?
so it's really easy because they were the same volume.
Soy la encargada de las notas periodísticas en todo lo relacionado a esta situación de
And this way, I can easily pick the right sources, and it's all the right sort of volume. From here, I'll take an EQ and drop it on the clip.
Have you all heard here about President
And then
Trump's
kind of put a
executive
quick
order
EQ grade
that
onto each of
promises
the
not
clips to
separate
balance them out.
families?
And that's the basics of the
About President
process.
Trump's executive.
That whole thing only took me about 10 minutes to finish. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to give you two short case studies. One of the pieces that I'm most proud of in my time at Vice was a story we did on the Unite the Right rally that happened in the end of August of 2017. It was a rally that happened down in Charlottesville, and it was a story that we turned into a half-hour special of a rally that happened down there. It instantly kind of became viral overnight. 65 million people in 3 days, and we've won a bunch of awards, four Emmys last year for the storytelling that happened there. It was interesting, we started about sending a crew down that we've been following them for a while, and we had about 20 hours of footage and 2 cameras, and we quickly realized that this is going to be a story of national attention. By Sunday, we were sending footage back, and we had 4 editors work together and kind of cut it down to about 40 minutes. By Monday morning, we reduced it down to 22 minutes and kind of split it into 4 acts. By Monday afternoon, we got our last new footage. We wanted to keep this as current as possible because the story was still, evolving. And by 4 p.m., that's when we first started, color and mix. We started working on it in segments, communicating with the different teams, kind of finishing it. And we were able to get it live to air at 7:30 that night. And Premiere gave us the ability to tell this story. We're not a single person standing there in front of the camera. We're able to create like a full documentary style. I feel there are news reports saying feature film crew was down here at a rally. But this is just what our show does every single night. And because of this workflow optimization, because of how well we've trained our team, we're able to create a really unique perspective in this style of storytelling and production, thanks to what's happening with Premiere. And I really do believe it changed the political conversation that was happening in America at alt-right at the time. Now, aside from this, we have done some longer feature film stuff, and we're also expanding. Recently, we just launched Vice Live, which is a nightly live show, Monday through Thursday. It's an hour. It's a variety show. We shoot it in our Brooklyn office there, and there's about 10 to 15 minutes of pre-produced content a night. It's skits, different stories that happen throughout the week that we put together. We put this together pretty quick. We had about 3 weeks, and I took this process that I had developed for news. We kind of copy and pasted as much of the workflow as possible. I trained the team with 2 kind of full workflow sessions, kind of seeing something similar to this, and we had it up and running pretty much seamlessly. What's amazing is we continued to color and mix it in Premiere, and we didn't have to hire any more people. We used the same sort of team that we've been using to mix the news show, to mix other stories, to bring it together, and it's so much more efficient now that we've done this process. So again, this is an idea that you should totally try with your production, whether or not you're doing news, a nightly show. It doesn't just have to be fast turnaround times. The dividends can be kind of brought everywhere. And I just want to kind of bring it back to this scene. These are the gains that we've seen. It's been kind of amazing. Vice absolutely values the relationship that we've built with Adobe. I've had so much great time working with Duran from the audio team, with Hartmut with engineering. Thank you so much for all the improvements. When we started working on Premiere 2015, they're like, this is a bit of a pie in the sky. We're not quite ready for this, but we did it anyways, and they helped us every single step of the way. And with 2019 Premiere, this new release, it's just gotten better and better. And we couldn't be more happy. If you're really interested in workflow and everything else, other than the audio side, which I kind of speak to, you should check out my colleague, Ben Baker. He did a talk at Adobe Max, which is excellent, which kind of shows how all the Vice is set up, talking After Effects, Photoshops, whatever. That's a real masterclass on it. So it's online. You should check that out as well. And thanks again for having me at Adobe booth.